Hello and welcome to Healthy, Fit, and Pain Free Pittsburgh. I am your host, Ryan Wade, here as always with Dr. Tyler Bordick.
Yo, 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 yo!
And with a special guest, a good friend of the show, good friend of Inner Strength, good friend of Pittsburgh altogether, Andrew Wade.
Wow, thank you. What a nice introduction. Hi, everybody.
And we have Andrew in. If you don't know, Andrew is the president, CEO, czar of the Case-Specific family of brands, Case-Specific Nutrition, Case-Specific Meal Prep, Rate My Day app, OptiLife Academy. What am I missing?
Case-Specific Athletics and the CSN 3M podcast.
There you go. Awesome. So Andrew does have
Shameless plug.
Andrew does Andrew does have his own podcast called the CSM 3M podcast. And, I think that segues nicely into just like, why should people listen to you? And maybe just if you want to throw in, what do you talk about on the CSN 3M? And I think that'll kind of push us nicely forward.
Awesome. Absolutely. So, the title CSN 3M stands for Case-Specific Nutrition 3M, which is Mindsets, Myth-Busting, and Mentoring. And so on the podcast every week, I do a Mindset Monday. They're about 15 minutes long, and they discuss a key concept in the world of health and wellness, some sort of perspective, some sort of myth bust, something that allows people to kind of think about what they're doing in their life on their path to wellness, and maybe a way to shake it up and look at it a little bit differently.
Sure. And before we kind of turn the mic on, and this is actually the point where we realized like we should really have the mic on. This is where we were kind of starting to break down, this idea that especially during right now with COVID, and I hate using like these uncertain times and these days, but
the new normal.
All those cringeworthy axioms. But we were talking about this idea of just this general procrastination of people in their health, not only during COVID, because we've touched on this podcast, where we hear people coming in and telling us like, I put on the COVID 18, I put on the COVID 20, all the way to I've put on the COVID 80, right? And it's like there's this whole range of outcomes when it comes to just the lack of proactivity, the lack of desire to improve people's health during the COVID world that we are living in. But it isn't exactly just only pertaining to the situation that we're currently in. It's this idea that, everybody I think knows that they're making a conscious decision between wellness and illness. But yet we still procrastinate for whatever reason it is, and then it just kind of creates more downward spiral and negative thoughts, which creates more procrastination. And the side effects, the negative side effects on people's health just starts to pile up and pile up and pile up. Andrew, you've counseled hundreds of thousands of people, right?
Maybe at this point.
Okay, yeah. So, where do you see this cycle ultimately getting broken with people who do put their foot down, right? And what do you think are the major factors that kind of get them to that point? Because I know there's so many listeners out there thinking like, I'm stuck here and I don't know what to do about it, and things just keep getting worse.
Yeah, I like to refer to that as the flip from a vicious cycle to a prolific cycle, right? Which is that observation that when we're caught in this acute fear, which is what COVID and those types of things do. They shock our system, they create doubt, they create uncertainty, and we start looking at fearful things. We start looking at the tree, so to speak, on the side of the road, right, as we're driving past. And that can spiral. It can lead to neglect. It can lead to sort of this acute hyper-focus on the problems as opposed to an awareness of potential solutions. And what ends up happening is 6 months go by, and we saw this a lot during this last year. You had people that said, okay, the shutdown's 2 weeks long. I'm just going to bunker down, batten down the hatches. I'm going to weather the storm. And then 11 months go by. And it's like, I've been abandoning all forms of self-support and self-care for 11 months in an effort to deal with a short-term problem, quote unquote. That's reality, not actually a short-term problem. And one of the things we have to recognize is habits, right? Our health habits, our life habits, they are meant to be either something that supports us through those things or something that gets us out of those things. And when we temporarily pause something so that we can collect our information, observe our surroundings, that makes a lot of sense. But the key is once we resume doing things, we need to make sure that we're going forward with a more proactive solution. So we pause, we take a moment and go, okay, what am I currently dealing with? What are the things I'm going to pause doing so that I can deal with this? But then on the other side of it, as I work through it, what can I do? What can I add back in? And so a lot of times people get stuck in this phase of reducing the weight in the hot air balloon. They're just like abandoning things left and right. They don't ever switch gears, which is they look to start adding things back. When you're dealing with the uncertainty, you can add habits in that allow you to manage the uncertainty. And just like abandoning habits can create a vicious cycle downward, adding new habits, new interventions can create a prolific cycle upward.
How dare you use the word uncertainty?
Uncertainty, I know. After we bashed it, I used it, 6 times there?
Maybe. So, I heard you say a couple keywords that I was kind of picking up on. And it's just this idea that, support and care, right? And I think this plays such a crucial role in everything that we do. I don't know if we really explained what your real zone of genius is, right? Like
my origin story.
Your origin story, and maybe we can go there kind of after this and kind of give a little backstory after. But support and care, be it from a dietitian, be it from a personal trainer, be it from a physical therapist, the three at the table, right? Like. It's this idea that people, I think, a lot of times get confused that like a support system is only needed for a short period of time. Yeah. And anything longer than that is scary, right? Like I'm going to rely on relationships for longer than that, right? And I heard a quote yesterday, and I forget where it's some guy who did a TED Talk, and I forget his name, but he said, the opposite of addiction is not like recovery, right? The opposite of addiction is human relationship. Right? Connection, right? And so when we are, it's the idea that we are scared shitless to commit part of our weakness to someone else to help us improve it, right? And I think it's just like, whether you're searching for the dietitian or the personal trainer or the physical therapist or whoever it is, right? It's kind of like, what's your preferred flavor, and what are you going to pull out of that relationship? So maybe let us take that to what is your origin story? How do you support people? And if you can throw in, I'll even throw in, please, for the love of God, break down the difference between a dietitian and nutrition, because I'm a nutritionist, because I'm sick of answering the question.
Deal. I'll do it live. So as you've alluded to, I am a registered dietitian by training and by trade. I have specialties I did a master's in wellness and human performance, and I have my sports certifications as a CSSD. But a lot of my graduate level of education was that on habits, behavior, and all of those things that combine. So I do a lot of health coaching / life coaching, in addition to that medical nutrition therapy, helping people utilize nutrition and activity and habits to change their life and reverse things like chronic diseases. Case-specific nutrition is my foundation business, right? It's 6 offices with, I think we're at 14 registered dietitians, and that's the bulk of what we do is lifestyle intervention, medical nutrition therapy. But obviously it's branched off into other components in an attempt, as you and I have talked about, to try and support people coming from different angles. A registered dietitian is a licensed medical professional. So if you have someone who says they're a registered dietitian, that means that they did a 4-year undergraduate degree in clinical dietetics. That means that they did a residency internship that is 1,800 hours of supervised practice. And then that means they took a standardized exam, and it is now becoming mandatory that they also have a master's degree that is relevant in the field. Mm-hmm. So most registered dietitians will also have a master's. Mine is in wellness and human performance. My wife's is in clinical dietetics and nutrition. There's some do exercise science, exercise physiology, so on and so forth. So that is a registered dietitian. 4-year undergrad, residency, internship, standardized exam, continuing education, continued exams, all that good stuff. Yeah. A nutritionist means nothing in the state of Pennsylvania. It's not a license, it's not a profession. It is simply a term that means one who studies nutrition. Mm-hmm. So all 3 of us are technically nutritionists because you read an article on nutrition yesterday for your son, right? Mm-hmm. Like that makes you a nutritionist. The problem is some people that are nutritionists actually do have a lot of knowledge, right? I mean, my biochemistry professor in college that ran the research lab and did all the omega-3 fatty acid research for Pitt, he was a nutritionist. Now he has a doctorate in biochemical nutrition, so use the term.
Yeah.
But like a nutritionist could also be like the random trainer that took a weekend course and is now trying to like plug his latest and greatest idea. Or it could be that bodybuilder Instagram influencer that did a show once and thinks that they can help everybody else. So nutritionist is a very scary term because it can mean a lot of things. Registered dietitian, you kind of know what you're getting. But I will say that even amongst registered dietitians, there's a difference between a clinical dietitian, one that works in the hospital and does all acute care, and a preventive dietitian, one that's trained for outside the hospital, like my staff is, to actually deal with people in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah. And so, let's carry on there is, let's go back and talk about the differences in support, right? The differences in the way that you cultivate relationships as a registered dietitian, the way that you get people results ultimately, hold them accountable. Because, I can't even count how many times a year I have somebody come in and we tell them that we work with this amazing team of dietitians from Case Pacific. And they're like, oh no, I have nutritionists. Look, they gave me this list of food that I can and can't eat. Look, they know what they're talking about, right? So, can you maybe expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, no, that's a great one. I wish I could scream this one from the rooftop, so hopefully this goes viral. But yes, the difference really is in the name, that case-specific concept, right? When we work with people, we aren't going to be giving templated lists. We aren't going to be assigning good and bad. We're going to be helping people navigate their food, their reality, their life, whether that mean the social events that they're tied to, their schedules, their access to food, all those types of things. And then looking at their body, looking at their genetics, looking at their medical history, and helping them figure out where their weak points are and where they can get stronger. And so it's not just as simple as eat this, not that. Food is much more complex than that. There's a reason why the two most popular trendy diets in 2020 were the keto diet, which is a high-fat, high-protein diet, and the vegan diet, which is a lower-fat and lower-protein diet. They are completely opposite on the spectrum, and they both claim to prevent the same chronic diseases.
There's Netflix specials on both of them.
And
of course, they're for real.
Yeah, of course, they're legit. But it's just to say that fad diet, templated, eat this, not that, across the board, you're going to miss most people. And then it's also the voice, and you've kind of alluded to this, Ryan, right? Like, at the end of the day, there's so many different practitioner styles out there, and that's necessary because there's so many different sets of ears out there. People like certain voices, right? I mean, some people need health and wellness to come from a place that's more softer and caring and loving. Some people need their health and wellness to come from a place that's motivating and inspiring, right? Why is Jocko Willink and David Goggins both best-selling authors? Because they talk about no BS style approach to life. And then we have an entire, body positivity and like self-love segment, and it speaks to people. And so as a dietitian, our job isn't to sell our latest list of things. Our job is to help you figure out what you need, and then also provide a voice and a perspective that keeps you in tune with you and motivates you along your way. So I'm going to have clients that I'm a David Goggins style guy. Let's push. And I'm going to have clients that we're going to be a little bit softer and a little bit more, work on like understanding and progress and being a little bit more forgiving. Different people need different things.
Sure. Yeah. What's your flavor, right? And that's kind of what we've been talking about. And we say this ad nauseum about inner strength, but the people that we support are people who have been supporting others and are therefore support fatigued, right? And so they just want somebody to care for them, right? And it comes from a place of caring, not from a place of no BS, which is completely on the opposite end of the spectrum and what people would think of when they think of a quote unquote gym or fitness facility, right? Because they usually think about the hardcore trainer who's pushing them to do X, Y, and Z, and don't give me your bullshit.
If you're not puking, you're not working.
Right, exactly. And it's so far on the other end of the spectrum. That's part of the reason why we have this podcast, is to explain to people, there are different flavors and there are ways to be supported in that. So let's start to think about just in terms of nutrition. I know Doc here was, kind of prefacing before we started with just, what are the things that have just kind of been burning your ears, right? And I think I heard a little bit of on the vegan and the keto, right? But I think that's a good place. Is just there's so much. Dr. Google just knows everything, right, out there, and people, we all know that we've had plenty of time to Google things this year. So, what are the things that are, I don't want to say new and exciting, right, but what are the trendy things in nutrition that are maybe good or not good right now?
I mean, I think, you kind of hit it on the head. There's definitely sort of that fad style of things going on. You know that's happening when the amount of books coming out proclaiming a unique diet exceed the amount of books that you could legitimately read in a year, right? The amount of different doctors or wellness gurus that are coming out with their latest fad approach it's frankly exhausting, and it's also extremely overlapping and repetitive. I think the biggest thing for me is lately the one that's been burning. We actually just had a conversation in our dietitian group chat this morning about sort of the toxicity of elimination diets. Right now, everybody is obsessed with what they can't have. Ooh, I can't have gluten, or I can't have dairy, or I can't have nightshades, or I can't do this, and this causes inflammation. And while it's true that gluten, dairy, and nightshades do promote pro-inflammatory markers in the body, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, right? We need inflammation, which is why our wounds heal and our muscles repair. And we also need anti-inflammation, which is why we don't stay sore for years after we lift a dumbbell. And so it's just to say that a lot of times we're getting a little bit obsessed with trying to create this perfect diet, and as a result, a lot of people are starting to overly eliminate and overly restrict. And you're starting to see these elimination diets where they're saying no wheat, no gluten, no dairy, no tree nuts, the list gets so long that you end up with these really, really basic burnt down diets. And while those diets are probably really easy to digest and they're really focused, so they create hyper consistency, which allows the body to do some levels of inflammation reduction. And then initially people do them and they feel ooh, something's changing, I feel better. Meanwhile, they're shutting down their digestive tract. They're basically telling their pancreas that they don't need a lot of their enzymes. They're telling their stomach they don't need as much acid. They're telling their body they don't need as much of things. And then they're putting their gut into this state where the probiotics and the gut bacteria aren't thriving like they're supposed to. And it basically goes into this power save mode. And then when they go to add foods back in, they can't digest things they used to have no problem with. And they're creating this gut fatigue because they're being overly restrictive. And so I think it's all to say that people are looking for customized dietary intervention. And I built a business based on the pretense that there should be customizable dietary intervention, but mass elimination is never the solution to customization.
Sure.
I'm a big fan of what we call it within Case Specific, we call it reverse elimination, which is you could look at something like the AIP diet, the autoimmune protocol. It is probably one of the most rigid elimination diets out there. It's for people with autoimmune diseases, and there's a lot of autoimmune out there right now, and we don't have a great understanding of why all of a sudden it's flaring up. We have some considerations, some thoughts, and we're looking at stress and all those things, but it's to say that AIP diet removes 8 major food groups. And the key there is if we do a reverse, we could sit down with somebody and by looking at what they eat, what their energy levels are like, what their lifestyle's doing, how they're feeling, all the things we dig into, we could identify the most likely culprits if they are related to digestion. And instead of removing all 8 at once, you remove the one that's most likely to cause the problem and see the benefit. So instead of creating this extremely restricted diet, you end up with a reality where you're helping someone better target, and you're not creating mass fear, mass hysteria, where now people are like, well, I didn't eat these things for years, I can't eat them anymore. No, you're setting someone up to actually have good knowledge and be empowered with what their body responds to. So
yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So with the elimination diet, we've talked about this before, and in our, at least my opinion, but we kind of agree that elimination diet's there because it's easier in a sense. It's easier because instead of you sitting there meal prepping and going through this plan, now you can just eliminate one food group and that's it. You have a diet. You love you like mindset. You love the psychology of this. Why do you feel psychologically, if you could dig deep of why the elimination diets typically tend to trend?
Oh yeah, no, that's a great question. And so I think it becomes really clear that just like the beginning of this conversation, what we talked about, people fear uncertainty, and a plan is a path that feels certain, right? And so a templated pathway that is follow these instructions, they've worked for others, creates a level of confidence in it, right? It gives it a certain level of comfort. Yeah, there's reassurance. Where the idea of customization, that idea of let's work through this, let's build something together, it doesn't seem like it has as obvious of an outcome, right? There's not the testimony on the other side. So people really, they go after fads and trends because they seem like they are certain.
Now, do you ever feel so let's go, you know, like the CrossFit, I always like love to say like the CrossFit mentality, you know, because it's like a band of brothers. You know, you have like a group camaraderie. You have these people together that are all like fighting the war every single day that they go to the gym. Do you feel like diets are the same way?
They can be, for sure. I think anything can be. I mean, at the end of the day, as humans, we want to connect.
Tribal,
right?
yeah.
We're tribal, right? Why are the three of us, you know, hovering around a microphone, recording a podcast? Right?
We're awesome.
Because we're awesome, but also because we want to connect with the world, and we've connected with each other because we have mutual respect for one another, and so we are aligning with similar vision. And so, as humans, wanting to connect with others is inherent, and whether that connection comes through exercise, whether that connection comes through hobbies, whether that connection comes through shared values, whether that connection comes from a dietary protocol. All of it's the same concept. It's a random task inserted by a collective of people who are agreeing to do it together, and it makes them feel like they're part of a tribe. And so yes, diets can be tribal, and to be honest, I always say the reason I'm not going to be a billionaire is because I'm not willing to sell something that preys on tribism. I'm only willing to help individuals find their path. I'm not interested in creating the latest diet fad that gets trendy but hurts a bunch of people along the way for my own benefit, right? And that's for better or for worse.
And sometimes the diet in and of itself makes it just that much more available to become part of the whole of something else, right? Like veganism. I love animals. So I'm going to save the animals, right?
The earth, exactly.
And so I think a lot of it goes in the same, you know, you can say the same thing about what gym you join or what kind of exercise you do. Runners, right, are runners, right?
How many running clubs are there?
Right.
Why do people pay hundreds of dollars to run a marathon?
Right.
Well, they could go run 26 miles on their own, but they like to be around other runners that share the same interests. They like to be given access to the latest shoes and the latest running tape.
A
They like
$20
to
shirt.
Yeah, a $20 shirt, right, that shows them that they're a part of a tribe. I mean, everything we do, and I think that this last year has made us kind of reflect on that a bit, because a lot of the things we did to connect with other people were paused or taken or held back in some way, and we're all left on the other side of that trying to figure out, how do I make new connections, how do I modify connections, and what am I now connected to?
Yeah, and I love it because I think this is really coming full circle here, because it's, you know, we're starting to attack the issue of how do we attack procrastination in our health. And it all comes down to that phrase, like I said, like addiction. The opposite of addiction is not recovery, it's human connection, right? And so if you are out there struggling to get started, find the human that you connect with who you want to model with, right? With or for or whatever your little heart desires to help you get started, right? I know in business and in health in a lot of different ways, like, you know, I've even modeled after you for years. We've been working together for a long time, you know, and so it's a matter of taking that first step, because the first step is the most important. And with that, getting kind of good at the segue thing. What is more important than nutrition in your health?
All right. I mean, I think when you think about it, it serves as the foundation that allows you to do everything else. So while you may get greater happiness from your connection with the people around you, right? Your friends, your family, your loved ones, your ability to do that comes from your ability to be healthy in the first place, and support the system that allows you to engage with it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a matter. So now we've got this idea of, you know, we've waited long enough. There's a million different ways that we can customize our own nutrition to be able to get started. We can model after somebody else who inspires us. We can join a band of brothers and sisters who are like us, right? How do we keep it going?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a couple things there. I think, you know, one, we can note there's that common saying that you're going to end up being an average of the 5 people you spend your most time with. And so right now, if you're looking to try and change who you are or evolve who you are or nudge yourself a certain way, first thing you need to do is take a look at who you're spending your time with and try and infer what you're getting or gathering from that individual. And so if you're somebody that wants to prioritize your health and wellness in a different way, you probably need to be spending time with people that are also prioritizing their health and wellness in a different way, right?
Yeah.
And that is why joining training at a place like Inner Strength it becomes a really good way to do that because you spend time with your trainer, you spend time with the physical therapist here, you spend time with the other people here, and they become a larger part of your day-to-day, which means those actions become positive and reinforced. And then from a dietary perspective, you start hanging out with people that are also interested in fueling themselves properly and nourishing themselves well. And so it's, a fun way to think about it is a lot of times people that go to the gym together also go out to dinner together, right? And instead of drinking, 3 liters of beer and being overwhelmed, they go out.
Whoa! Come on now.
You're attacking Doc's beer. He won't stand for it.
Man, I even said 3 liters. That's like a gallon, man. That's a lot of beer. I was trying to be good.
COVID's been tough.
But we can see where it's like you start surrounding yourself with those individuals. And so from a food perspective, it's recognizing that the way you eat and how you eat and your relationship with food can serve a couple of complex points here, right? Is one, it can be a reflection of how you're spending your time and who you're spending your time with. It can also be reflective of a lack of connection, right? Food is one of the things that brings us sort of guaranteed joy in the moment, and so emotional eating is a big complex part of this puzzle, especially in a time where a lot of people are feeling isolated, feeling depressed, feeling disconnected from things and from others. Turning to food as the thing that's reliable and accessible and there and guaranteed to create some fireworks in the brain, all of a sudden you now have a relationship with food. So when you're there analyzing who's the 5 people you spend the most time with, well, like if one of those people is you alone with a thing of ice cream, you're realizing that is playing a role in all of this, right? That self-isolated alone time is in itself contributing to your overall sense of well-being and self. And so what we can see there is we don't need to criticize the ice cream. We need to be more cognizant of the environment in which it's being consumed and make modifications to that. And so I think step 1 is always find some people that make you happy or find a thing that you want to do that makes you happy, and then allow that to be the first stepping stone that allows you to start looking for positive things. And where you look is where you go is the reality. And so it's not surprising that most people look back on 2020 and they highlight reel it with all the negative things that happened. And it's because after the first bad thing, they looked for the second, and then they looked for the third, and then they looked for the fourth, and then they anticipated the fifth, and they predicted the sixth. And they got into this tendency of basically looking for the negative. And then a bunch of people turned into 2021 and said, oh, well, you know what? It's a new year. It's going to be a new start. And then the first thing that happened that was newsworthy was an insurrection. And everyone said, oh, another bad thing. Guess it's another year of bad. And it's, well, what if we decided to look for the good? I can look back on 2020 and remember it as the year that was the pandemic, or I could look back on it and realize it was the year that I started case-specific meal prep, and it was the year that I hired more people than ever before, and I expanded my business to do a bunch of new things, and I took risks, and I bet on myself, and I went to my 50th country. I did a lot of good things in 2020. Mm-hmm. Choosing to see that as a negative year is a choice. It's not a reality. So if you can train your mind to identify something positive, and then just like we are really good at combining negatives and making a chain reaction, combine the positives and make a chain reaction, you're going to notice that it feels a whole lot better.
Yeah. Did you say 50 countries?
50 countries.
I haven't even been to 50 states, man.
I don't think most people, I haven't been to 50 states, if that helps.
Right. And I just think it speaks to such, and this is why we do so much work together, right? It's because the idea of focusing on what you can do instead of what you can do or what you can't do, and focusing on the customization that should be your health because you are a unique individual unlike any other is exactly the way that we approach fitness and physical therapy, right? You can focus on the things that you can't do whenever you hurt your knee, or you can focus on the things that you can do, which is going to help make it stronger, right?
Which I'm probably going to throw Andrew to a tangent when I say this one, but I think
he's easily triggered.
The other problem, I'm going to segue here. The other problem that we run into with that though is, yes, our mind tricks us, but what about other people telling us we can't do things? What about your, shall I say it, doctor telling you can't do things?
Yeah.
What about, online people look things up and they say you can't do things? What about the media that says that you can't do things?
Exactly.
We had all these restrictions placed on us. And granted, like you said, I can look back on 2020 and give you a handful of amazing, great things that happened.
Yeah.
But if I listen to somebody else tell me how horrible it was, that's where the shit show begins. So, that's kind of a big part of it as
Before
well.
Andrew does go into his tangent, I just wanted to let you know we've already earned our explicit tag.
Oh,
all right, so
I can swear?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Good. I was going to earlier and I went, I don't know if it's that kind of podcast. So that comment earlier, though, like that idea of where you look is where you go, but one of the first things that comes to mind when you say that is, why does language exist? Right? Why did, as humans, as a species, did we create language, right? We popped up all over the world. Tribes that weren't discovered until 100 years ago use language. It's their own language, but like humans as an animal use language. And initially it was meant to protect each other. It was meant to communicate because there was danger, right? And so what we have to realize is that language at its base is something that we use to say, basically to warn each other about things. And there's a reason why. It's because we're a fear-driven creature, right? Like that's our survival. At the end of the day, whenever I'm out hiking with my dogs, it always crosses my mind that when it's 20 degrees in Pittsburgh, I'm out there in like 16 layers because I'm this like fragile human being, and my dogs are out there like rolling around in snow like nothing's bothering them. We aren't like the most strong or versatile. We are an intelligent creature, and so we created language as a way to protect ourselves. And fast forward to the modern day, that is still how we dominantly communicate to one another. We warn each other of things. And so societally speaking, and if you take Sociology 101, you'll dig into this, right? One of the most foundational observations in sociology is we spend 4 times at least as much time talking about the negative as we do the positive. And so if you're going to find positive, it does start within, but it also starts by finding other people that want to look for the positive. You have to train yourself to look for it, and if you surround yourself with people who do, it'll be a whole lot easier. And it's also tempering where you look for things, right? Like, how much time have I spent watching live news coverage this year? 0 minutes, right? Like, I have zero interest in that. At the end of the day, that's not where I get my information. It's never going to be where I get my information because I know what it does. They're trying to sell advertisements. They're going to spin fear that keeps you glued. And I understand the business model. I also understand the mechanism of social fears, but that's not useful to me. That doesn't help me as I'm trying to change people's lives. That doesn't motivate or inspire me to give someone good news. That doesn't help me be a better mentor to my team. Useless, right? So at the end of the day, it's unfortunate that as a society, we will have a tendency to always look towards the negative or a tendency to be pulled that way. But that doesn't mean individually and in small collectives, we can't look for the positive still.
That's the unfortunate thing too, because like a lot of times it's because if you look at two big emotions, you look at fear, you look at happiness, okay? What, in a marketing standpoint, we've done our research as far as a marketing sales background, stuff like that. What do people like to use most as marketing? Fear. Because fear is what speaks to people more. And it's kind of unfortunate that it's come to that point, and I still am curious exactly why that is. But like you said, I mean, it is that people look a lot more at the negative than they will at the positive.
Most people spend more time, and we, even those that are, I would consider myself a pretty positive person. Like, it's pretty hard to find me in a time where I'm not like somewhat peppy and outgoing and stuff. And like, to say that there isn't a part of my brain that's constantly like dealing with imposter syndrome and telling me I'm not good enough and like worrying about if everything crumbles from beneath me, like, of course that exists, but it goes back to how much time do I give it. I've, over the last decade, gone from letting it be like probably half of my brain space to slowly but surely it's like it has like a trunk in the attic. Like it just gets smaller and smaller, and I get better and better at shushing it because I realize it's not coming from a place of value, and that doesn't come easily. It comes from practice, and it comes from intention. I've surrounded myself with other can-do people, and for anybody out there listening that's stuck in that feeling of can't and is feeling helpless or feeling detached or feeling like things they care about are out of their reach, start focusing on small things that you can do and realize that small things you can do can become big, right? I mean, 7 years ago, I could make a meal plan for a couple of my college buddies. And 7 years later, that is a business that has 26 total employees and is impacting thousands of people a month.
Yeah.
I didn't start with this big business. I didn't start with, even the ambition to have this big of a business. I wanted to make a difference, and I started with a $50 meal plan in my college dorm, right? Like, and it built its way forward, and it built its way up. And so we always have to start small and let the snowball accumulate. And unfortunately, it requires a little bit of patience. But if you enjoy the journey and you celebrate the victories along the way, it's worth the ride.
mean, success is an inside job, right?
Right.
You know.
Yeah. As much as I would love to, and I know we could stand here all day and talk. We do try to keep this under 20 minutes. That never happens. We try to keep it under 50 minutes. But we do always also try to end it with a easy to digest, actionable piece of information or result, right? And so, and when you talk about making small changes, right? What is the first 1, 2, 3 things that somebody can do to get out of that? Let's just use that negative mindset that's causing us all to procrastinate and choose illness over wellness, right? Like, what are the first couple steps to actually getting that done? If you had to advise, say, a 55-year-old woman who has delayed her health because of her family, and now she has the time to do it, but doesn't know where to start, what to do, and all she does is focus on the negative news of the world that we've had for the last year. Where would you start her?
Ooh, I love that. So, I think the biggest piece we'd look for is we'd look to try and install some positive actions in the day. It doesn't come easily, but right, a way to think about it is training a new habit comes from intentionally doing something repetitively. Just like most of us are in the habit of brushing our teeth before we go to bed. That's something that was taught to us when we were really young, and I don't think many of us even think twice about it. We just kind of do it. That's the same thing here. If you're looking to try and train positivity into your life, you might be someone that needs to start by keeping a positivity journal. And that could be something as simple as keeping a note open on your phone handy, and whenever you have a positive thought or observation or something makes you smile, you type it down so that you remember it. It could be taking 5 minutes at the end of the day to jot down a couple sentences about the good things that happened that made the day worth living.
Sure.
Where you look is where you go. If you spend your time focusing on the positive in your life, you will notice it gets easier and easier to find it.
Sure.
So I think some sort of journaling to train your brain to look the right direction is probably number one. And then from there, I think we can start to identify, you'll naturally start to look for ways to enhance or make your life more positive, which is to say, what are some of the things that you feel are your current biggest pain points, right? Is it pain and inflammation? Is it lack of connection? Is it physical immobility? And based on that, there are obvious interventions that we could start working on from that. So if you decide that food is something that has, needs improved in your relationship, scheduling meetings with a dietitian, for example, can be an action that allows you to start working on that. And then following up with them, which gives you a timeline, working with a physical therapist for the physical mobility, working with a trainer to build strength. Identifying something along those lines would be key. But when we start with looking positive, I think the only other thing I would note that I think everybody should do is they should identify and set aside time each day to try and advance their mindset. So obviously journaling is a self-reflection, but we want to also have some sort of guided enhancement. And so reading 10 pages of a book a day, for example, or listening to a podcast each day, or listening to an audiobook, right? If you can have a little bit of time set aside that you open your mind to positive perspective, and then you have a little bit of time set aside that you actually practice positive perspective, those two things will amaze you at how quickly they work. Based on the listeners in this audience that you guys have mentioned, a couple books that I think would be a great idea to get started on are Give and Take by Adam Grant. Give and Take is probably one of the most profound books I've ever read. As somebody that was, willing to completely abandon my exercise and my eating habits and everything so that I could fit 3 more clients into my day because I thought I was helping people. And then as a result, got extremely burnt out because I was always giving, and I suffered from giver burnout. The Adam Grant book discusses that givers are the most successful people, but only if they learn to be otherish, which is they learn to put other people first, but they know the things they need to do to keep them in the best place so they can do their best giving. Fantastic book, really good insight, lets you feel good about helping others, but also teaches you that being otherish is not being selfish. And then the other book is Wired to Connect, and I'm blanking on the author's name off the top of my head right now, but Wired to Connect talks about some of the science and the interventions that would be really useful for those that are trying to better understand why they are feeling lonely and isolated, and it gives good reason and rationale for why connecting with people is so important.
Amy Banks and Lee Ann Hirschman.
Yep, that's it. So those 2 books, Give and Take by Adam Grant and Wired to Connect by Amy Banks, those 2 books would be great starting points in that spirit of trying to change your perspective, open the mind. Obviously, from a podcast perspective, you're already listening to one, so listen to these when these guys come out with them, and make sure you find some that are like it, and hopefully we can continue to create content that helps people nudge their way in a positive direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think with that too, I know, like we talked about one of our members, Connie, who we posted videos on her. Connie also has a TikTok. There's another shameless plug for you there. But
Moms Matching Millennials.
Moms Matching Millennials. So one of the big things, so it's actually very interesting. So like with her take on it, it's always like she is trying to understand more about millennials and like how they function, because her kids are one, and like how connect better with hers. And I think that's one thing with our generation that becomes difficult, is the fact that we see especially on Instagram, you see these people, because Instagram is so new, or like social media is so new. These people now at their success point.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, I want to be there. And everything now is like, do this every day and you're going to be successful, or, earn $1,000 in 1 week, And so like we see that, but you don't see the pieces that go into that. So like, for instance, like, this is something I've struggled with, like with the gratitude journal. Every day you're sitting down looking for these extravagant things to write down. And it can be something like using child eyes. It can be something as simple as, like my wife. We go for a walk and my wife sees a red robin. And like there's like the adage of like a red robin is someone who died who's looking over you. So like that brightens her day. So something as small as that you can use to be grateful for.
Look for the little things. I
love
that.
I like two things come to mind before we wrap it up. Is we've been watching the Pixar movie Inside Out.
Yeah.
I've mentioned a couple times in the podcast, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. We're trying to teach them about their feelings, right? And something that just kind of popped into my mind is that one, Tony Robbins says, and I don't know if it's proven by science, but you cannot be negative and have gratitude at the same time. Right, it's pretty much impossible.
Yeah, they're opposing feelings.
Right, and so when we focus on that, right, then we can create more positivity throughout our day. Well, in Inside Out, they talk a lot about core feelings, right? And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but that's kind of what it's all kind of put around, right? Or core memories, I should say.
Yeah.
And I know that whenever I catch myself in the negativity spiral, right, I have 3 core memories that I bring up that are very positive. It's like when my son was born, when my daughter was born, I think about 2 specific memories on those days. And like the day I got married, when my wife like walked through the chapel doors, right? And so when I get back to those 3 things, those are my 3 core memories that I can always get to. It just makes everything so much easier for the rest of the day. So I think that's maybe one more actionable thing is if you can come up with 3 core memories.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
Right? That promote gratitude and positivity and overall
appreciation for life.
Right. Yeah. That's a really good place to start if you're stuck. So
and with that too, like this is just a real quick example of that. So like one of our members this was a while ago, like every member came in, you could just feel in the atmosphere that everyone just had a really shitty day. and so we decided, okay, give us one positive thing I said, give me one example of something that made you laugh today. And and one example of positivity, where one member's sitting there and she is just like, I can't think of anything. Well, no, there was a popsicle stick. I ate popsicle and they had a message on it. It was a joke, and it was like the stupidest joke ever. And she told it, but she goes, it made me laugh. And I said, so isn't it great to think that your day is actually not so bad that a popsicle stick can make you laugh?
Yeah.
And so like we have to think about, it's like that one simple thing that can make you laugh and change the day. And like you realize that life is actually not so
can't
bad.
be all that bad if a popsicle stick helps you. Anyway, so we're going to wrap this thing up. But first and foremost, I want to just remind everyone that Andrew is the owner of Case Specific Nutrition, who is a partner company of Inner Strength. We are home of the West location, and his great team member, Michelle Legree, who is here on Thursdays to consult and do everything that kind of Andrew talked about in the podcast today. So, we pair those services for all the reasons that Andrew talked about today. Andrew, can you give a rundown of where else they can find case-specific locations and how they can interact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have in addition to the West location, we have a South Hills in Mount Lebo. We have a McCandless North Hills location. We have an East Liberty, Shadyside Central office, and then we have a Plum location. We also have one out in Altoona for those that are maybe a little bit out of the Allegheny County region. We are also doing virtual consults because of one, access through insurance, and two, we've always done virtual consults.
Can you call it case specific worldwide?
Oh, almost. maybe one day, right? I'll have to figure out my rap
Those
first.
50 countries you've been to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Case
almost.
specific. They're going to all have case specifics. And then we are case specific nutrition on social media. Instagram is probably our most frequented. We're on Facebook as well, and we've got some good groups there. So that's an easy way to get a hold of us. If you go to casespecificnutrition.com, you can get in touch with our office staff, and they will check insurance, check coverage, get you scheduled with the right dietitian based on what you're working on and where you're trying to work on it. And that is, I think, the overview of case-specific everything.
Okay, very cool. No matter where you're listening, no matter where you're watching, no matter what you're doing, no matter where you're looking up on social media, like, comment, share, mark is important, VIP, star it, whatever you need to do. If you do those things, we will pop up on your feed. If you like positive feels and the truth about your health, then you will find it more often if you mark us as important and we don't go to any of your spam folders. So, for Doc Tyler, for Andrew, I am Ryan at Inner Strength. Stay healthy, fit, and pain-free, Pittsburgh.
Love you.